Hi, this is Rob Sacco. Rob Robin on most of the watch boards. I have a little lineup this morning to talk to you about. They're all Rolex sport watches. And basically, they're all Submariners. The Sea Dweller qualifies as a Submariner. A couple of them are sweet Sea Dwellers. And let's just go right off and talk about these two Submariners. This is kind of the granddaddy of the today's Submariner. Well, this is today's Submariner. The no date 14060M, which is a designation of the movement, and the 16610, the Submariner date. This is the icon in the watch industry, the most recognizable watch in the world. You can see that little Rolex crown. I think even a 3-year-old could tell you what that is these days. Now these still have the stickers on them. They're brand new watches. So the basic difference between these two, they're both 300-meter watches. They both have sapphire crystal automatic winding. But as you can see, first of all, and the most obvious point, that this has a date and this one does not. This one has stayed true to its historical or its heritage, and that it's kind of stayed the same for the last 50 years almost, or 40 years. Same style case. They added the crown guard, those little nibs there to protect the crown, but there was a model early on in history that didn't have the crown guard. There are always automatic movements. This one doesn't have a solid end link bracelet. What I mean by that is, if you look at the two watches, this has a piece of sheet metal to hold the bracelet onto the watch head at the lug here. So that little piece of sheet metal right here comes off and attaches to the end of the bracelet. It gets bent and wobbly over the course of time. Well, back at the, I think it's A serial watches, they added this solid end link. So this end link is attached to the bracelet. It's a solid piece of steel. And it never gets rattly or anything over the course of time, and that's where it attaches to the watch. So that was one of the big innovations in this watch. The bezel insert is, I think, aluminum or some combination of metal. And again, sapphire crystals, automatic movements. These are both chronometers, but for the longest time this 14060 was not a chronometer. Back a number of years ago, when this model was called the 5513, they did have a chronometer version of it called a 5512. Basically the same watch, but a slight modification to the movement. And plus it, so it was able to gain chronometer status. The dive extension was a little bit different in the watch, these two watches, and they made a modification probably 7 or 8 years ago, which helped. It was a pretty flimsy dive extension for the longest time, but you know, it worked, and this is the watch most people aspired to as they grow up and they got more affluent. Well, so that evolved. Now this is the granddaddy of that watch, which came along a little bit later, but not much later. This is called Sea Dweller. This one is the 16600. Now the basic difference you can see fairly quickly is that there is no bubble in the crystal to magnify the date. And this is a thicker crystal. Where that was a 300-meter watch, this is a 1220 meter, I think. Yeah, that's still 1220 meters. 4,000 feet. So it's a little more rugged. Same solid end link bracelet. These they came early on these, and then they came in the subs later. So they had the solid end link there, and also a very strong dive extension, which you can pop out here. So it sits right inside the back of the bracelet. You press that little circle, and the dive extension pops out. The other thing that's fairly noticeable right away is the helium escape valve right there. So for deep diving, it allows the helium that builds up in the case to escape but not let water in. So, but this is called a Sea Dweller, and it's kind of the granddaddy or the professional diver associated with the Rolex line. Basically the same